Now, politics is a real Muppet show, and the attention span of the audience is really, really short. Now, the biggest story right now is the development in the Mueller investigation, the whole Russiagate debacle, right before the midterm elections. So, is Mueller going to pull a rabbit out of his hat? Is he going to make some indictments? Is he going to leak something to the press? And is this going to hurt the Republicans? Will they lose their majority? And will that then be the start of an impeachment of Trump? Could the Democrats pull it off? And how is this going to affect America? Will America fall into the hands of the communists? Or will Trump save America from the communists? Now, this is kind of this whole big movie that's playing out in front of us right now. And people have forgotten about the Lewinsky scandal and Bill Clinton, which changed absolutely nothing, and people have forgotten about the George W. Bush fiasco. There were 50 to 100 reasons to impeach him. Even if you were a conservative, there was more than enough reason to impeach him. And Bush, Bush ultimately was a giant recruitment tool for the left. So this is something that conservatives need to be aware of. You know, it's one thing if you stick to your leader and you stick to your party, no matter what, because you think that's going to get you what you want and get you closer to your political goals. But Bush was such a caricature. He was ultimately a recruitment tool for the left. So many young people, impressionable young people who haven't read a lot of good books, they ran straight into the arms of the left because of George W. Bush. And now we see the same thing with Trump. To some degree, Trump is also kind of a recruitment tool for the left. And did this whole debacle with George W. Bush change anything with the power structure of the United States of America, the real power structure, the empire, the superpower? No, it changed absolutely nothing. And virtually almost everybody in the alternative media has forgotten that the Democrats and Republicans work for the same establishment. So at the top, there's no real difference. At the lower levels, there is competition, even fierce competition, but this is to keep the people busy, the voters busy, to keep the illusion going of a democratic process and to get the voters to fight with each other. So now, with Trump in office and the Mueller investigation, this whole Russiagate thing, right before the midterm elections, there are only two ways of thinking, right? There's only two scenarios that are being presented and talked about and fought against and fought for. Only two lines of thinking, two scenarios, even though there are more than those two scenarios. So one line of thinking is Trump is the savior. Trump is the guy who will save us from the communists, and Trump will cooperate with the conservative Russians, and the Republican Party now is kind of a force for good at this point, and the enemy is simply the Democrats, and the Democrats invented this whole Russiagate scandal. They completely made that up. They made this, they pulled this from thin air. Now that's one line of thinking. The other line of thinking is Trump betrayed his country, he's a Russian agent, or at least that's what Democrats are claiming for political reasons. You know, some believe it, some just say it. Trump is a Russian agent, Trump is a traitor, and with this Russiagate scandal, the Democrats, they want to get him out of office, replace him with a Democrat, and then everything's going to be fine. Those are the two lines of thinking, and both lines of thinking are very, very misleading. It shows that political thinking is very primitive. in this day and age, that it's almost gotten worse over the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, in the 70s, at least you had best-selling books such as None Dare Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen, who kind of exposed this whole left versus right game played by the establishment. But now it's all left versus right. Everything is a left versus right issue. Everything. Especially Trump's dealings with the Russians. So people don't think in people don't really think like intelligence analysts. People don't think of they don't think properly in terms of a superpower in the West and another superpower in the East, the Russians. Nothing beyond those two lines of thinking is investigated. So this Mueller thing, this Mueller investigation, might actually go absolutely nowhere. Despite years of investigations, not much might come out of it. And the Republicans, they might fare actually pretty well at the midterm elections. And before the next presidential election, Mueller has to close down shop. And that's going to be that. And even if that happens, even if that's the way this is going, we will still have no clear answer whether or not Trump makes his own decisions or whether or not Trump actually follows orders. For example, the orders of the United States establishment. So the whole Bill Clinton, Lewinsky thing didn't change a thing about this. The United States superpower didn't change anything. Didn't progress America. Didn't change anything. George W. Bush, nothing came out of that. Power structures really didn't change. Then came Obama, who was kind of a caricature, who didn't change anything. And now we have Trump, and Trump didn't really change anything, which the establishment wasn't willing to change. So, for example, I said more than 2 years ago, Trump is going to be the next Ronald Reagan. He's going to lower the rate of unemployment. There's going to be new jobs. People are going to be happy about that. And he's going to be fierce in foreign policy. People will respect him for that. But the New World Order marches on. Kind of this American superpower will not significantly change because back in the old days, Reagan's administration was full of insiders from the Council on Foreign Relations. And Reagan himself, he made his career through General Electric, and he was hooked into all these power circles. And even though Reagan said all these things, how he's hard on communism and the Soviets, and how he was free market and all that, the national debt became quite large under Reagan, and we all know what ultimately happened with the Soviet Union. They just changed and kept going. So, Trump didn't mess with the central bank and the money system. Trump certainly didn't mess with the military-industrial complex. Trump didn't mess with the police state. So the swamp is bigger than ever. And it's not just a swamp. It's the entire structure of the United States superpower. These intermarried families for generations and generations who they control the justice system and the political system and all that. So that goes back, hundreds of years. So this is America. These people, these families, they own the Democrats and Republicans. And now reporters from, especially mainstream media, they're now so occupied with this Mueller investigation right before the midterms. There's so many players involved, so many lines of inquiry, and this could become one of those topics where there's millions of documents in the end, just like the JFK thing or 9/11 or some cases like that. Millions of pages of documents. No human could ever read this stuff. And and this Russiagate thing becomes even more complex if you understand the true nature of the American superpower and the Russian superpower and the relationship between those superpowers. So you could easily lose yourself in the details and the mountain of documents, but once you know what you can disregard and once you know what to focus on, then you'll understand much, much better what's going on. So the audience, the voters, they form opinions about this Russiagate Mueller investigation. They base their opinions on their political preference and just wishful thinking, you know, what they want it to be. So the Trump supporters say it's all a lie. This is completely made up by the Democrats, and the Democrats they paid this Steele guy to make up a fake dossier, and it's all just invented. There's nothing there, absolutely zero. And of course, these Trump supporters, they're ignoring a mountain of strange dealings and meetings and connections. Now, so far, no clear smoking gun has been found, but again, it's a mountain of strange things, and we have to understand what these strange things mean. And it's and then we had, I think, even Alex Jones insinuated he wouldn't care if the Russians had compromising material on Trump. I mean, what kind of a comment is that? What kind of an opinion is that? I mean, that's one of the weirdest things I've heard in this whole discussion. Now, the Democrats supporters, the left, they act as if a treason has almost been proven at this point, and this is almost an open and shut case. This is a no-brainer. Trump needs to be removed from office. And of course, the Democrats are really silent about Hillary's connections to the East. So as I said, those who really rule America, you know, the families for generations and generations, they've had the craziest dealings with Russia. You know, corporations and individuals who visit Bilderberg conferences for decades. They've had the craziest relationships with the Soviets, with the Russians. And yeah, it's not as simple as people make it out to be. So, investigator Mueller is now even hunting Roger Stone's people, and Roger Stone is not an idiot. He probably protected himself, but who knows what's going to come out of this? But it's not as if the Democrats have just invented all of this. You know, that Robert Steele's dossier is just nothing. You know, a nothing burger. Of course, it's politicized. Of course, everything is politicized, but not necessarily in the way people are thinking or for the reasons why people think. The Democrats could not have just invented the whole thing, right? Just the attempt would have been terrible for the Democrats. You know, if they had known from the start that nothing will come out of it. They couldn't have got it started if there was nothing. And the Steele dossier was partially confirmed by different intelligence agencies in Europe, and we have now kind of a mountain of facts and factoids that look absolutely weird, yet do not prove treason. So there's something, and we have to understand what that is and why that was, and why that is. So the Democrats are not stupid. They don't want to be caught manipulating like this. They don't want to be caught by the voter making this whole thing up from nothing, and Democrats lying to the United States voters and using or abusing the government agencies and the justice system for political reasons. Again, the whole impeachment thing with Bill Clinton changed nothing, and the calls for impeachment of George W. Bush and all that nothing happened. Nothing really happened. Nothing really changed. So, the Republicans are notoriously close to the CIA and the NSA and all these three-letter agencies, and so are the Democrats. You need to understand that. So the deep state is not left or right. Now, in the past, people considered the deep state to be right-wing. You know, the old boys network, the CIA, military-industrial complex, big corporations. And we had a whistleblower, Colonel Fletcher Prouty, who told us about the so-called secret team. Now, all of that, especially when you in connection to the John F. Kennedy assassination, all of this made the deep state look right-wing. But these people have so much money and these people have so much control. They also control the left-wing political sphere, and you should be aware of that. You know, despite Fox News and InfoWars telling you that the deep state is left-wing. Officially, there is no background check of a presidential candidate. So the FBI does a bunch of things, but there's no such process like you have with any other job in the military, or when you join an intelligence agency, or you handle anything sensitive. There's so many people in America, even if you just apply for a job at a pharmacy or whatever, you will be subjected to rigorous background checks. You will have to do a polygraph. You will have to do all kinds of things. They will inquire amongst your family members and friends, and they will snoop around in your life just so you can get this job. But when it comes to a presidential candidate, they're not being tested like this. You know, it's not like they have to it's not like they're tested like anybody else would be tested who wants a security clearance. And the president, formally, officially, the president decides what's secret and what's not. The president supposedly has access to everything, and so that is what we're being told. So, president has no security clearance in the sense that other employees of the federal government do. There is no document held by the United States government that the president is restricted from viewing for reasons of national security. A president cannot violate a security classification because the president has the absolute authority to decide who is and is not entitled to know what is in a classified document. So, most of the stuff the president can share with whomever he wants. But of course, the true establishment, the true deep state, the old families, the old American families who run this superpower, of course they background check everybody, even on a lower level, even on state senators and state congressmen and even below that. There's just no way there's just no way they let somebody just become president or a senator or a governor without background checking that person. Now, sometimes you get sort of an exception or half an exception or a glitch in the matrix, if you will, such as with Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura has always spoken out against this left versus right paradigm, this Democrats versus Republicans Muppet show, and he became a governor without the party apparatus. And he told a story when he got into office. He was met by these weird CIA people, and they posed all these questions to him. How did he do it, and 100 other things. And he asked them, "Why are you here? You're CIA. You're supposed to work abroad. You know, you don't have a domestic mandate. So what the heck's going on?" So there are certain exceptions, but by and large, the real rulers of the United States, superpower, the real power structure, they vet everybody. They want to control everybody of any importance, especially presidential candidates. So years ago, the CIA, the NSA, and all these other many agencies, they knew about Trump. They had a very specific idea who Trump was, what he was doing. And it's not hard to do for these agencies. You know, they go through all their databases. They scope out relevant people from Trump's family and business dealings, and the CIA can pull files from foreign assets, especially in Russia, and get a clear picture of who Trump is and what he's really been doing. It's not that hard to do. So the actual deep state, the actual American rulers and establishment, they don't need a dossier by this Mr. Steele. They don't need a dossier like that from a freelancer. They don't need that. They've got their own apparatus. They've got their own agencies. They knew everything. The establishment knew who Trump was. The establishment knew what Trump did, and they let him into the White House. So if you are making, you know, deals with Russians and weird Russians for millions and tens of millions of dollars, if you sell them your condos, if you let them into Trump Tower, if you're dealing with all these people like Felix Sater and all these these creatures and characters, if you're dealing with these intermediary people and so on and so forth, the CIA will know about it. The NSA will know about it, period. And nobody in the so-called alternative pro-Trump media almost nobody ever bothered to clarify this. So most likely the intelligence agencies knew exactly from the start, or at the top of the intelligence agencies, they knew right away from the start. They knew about the Trump situations. They knew about his sex parties. They knew about, cutting room floor recordings and allegations and connections to Jeffrey Epstein, and it's not that hard to do. And the intelligence agencies, they can make somebody quit their campaign. No problem whatsoever. You know, if Trump ever said anything, and that's just a hypothetical if he ever said anything that was recorded that could derail his career and would damage his reputation so far that he couldn't run for president, that's enough to control a guy like him. That's more than enough. So, you think the United States superpower would hesitate to manipulate the political process? You think they would stand by and watch Trump get into the White House against their wishes? And Trump has been jumping ship a couple of times over the years. He was a Democrat before 1987. Then he registered as a Republican. He switched independent, then became a Democrat again, and then he became a Republican again. He was exploring the option of running for the Reform Party at the year 2000 presidential election. So a poll showed Trump with 7% support compared to George W. Bush and Democratic nominee Al Gore. Now what does that mean? Bush and Gore were pretty close to each other, right? So if Trump had run that year, if Trump had actually run that year and said, this is just to make a statement, this is just to make me more famous, to get me more money, if he had chosen to run, and if he had chosen to run on a somewhat conservative platform, he could have derailed the chances of George W. Bush. It's a voting split. You know, if some voters chose Trump, then George W. Bush would have been lacking a few percent, meaning Al Gore would have won. Now, of course, the Bush family would not have liked that, and we know how connected they are. And then, of course, the establishment, the real establishment, wouldn't have liked it either, because they prefer, in the modern days, they prefer kind of 8 years from one party and then 8 years the other party, and then it's another 8 years of the, you know what I mean. And so, and we know about the voting fraud in 2000. Remember that story? George W. Bush versus Al Gore, and this whole debacle. And then, you know, Greg Palast, he discovered a lot, the reporter Greg Palast, he discovered a lot of voting fraud benefiting George W. Bush. And some Democrats, they made a big thing out of it, but then it died down and nobody cared anymore. You know, Michael Moore, he wrote about it in his book, but nothing really came out of it. It's long forgotten. And yeah, when Trump got elected, Greg Palast noticed a lot of the same tricks and techniques for voter fraud. And this story got very little attention, which is the weirdest thing in the world. I mean, you should think this would have been the biggest story of all. But Greg Palast had a really hard time getting people to hear him, and even places like InfoWars apparently refused to invite him again. InfoWars invited Greg Palast in the past, talking about the George W. Bush voting fraud, but not nowadays. Not when it comes to you know, possible, likely, alleged voting fraud benefiting Trump. So, there's a mountain, as I said, there's a mountain of weird things tying Trump to the Russians. No clear smoking gun, but a mountain of things. The Deutsche Bank, this weird bank who was kind of involved too. Lots of players, and I said this before, even creatures like Manafort, I mean, they look so much like the traditional right deep state. You know, he to me, he looks like the archetype CIA guy. I don't know if he worked for the CIA, if he ever worked for the CIA, but to me, he sure looks like one of those guys. I mean, Manafort, he made these, he created these waves in Eastern Europe, and he's doing all these things supposedly on his own. I mean, if you believe that, then, you know, you clearly haven't read anything of value. So it's weird. It's super weird. And you can't expect the American establishment to have been in the dark about it. It's not like the American establishment. It's not like the American establishment now needs an investigation to find out what was going on, and an investigation to get rid of Trump and to get him out of office. Nobody in the almost nobody from the alternative media, so-called patriot media or whatever, almost nobody has been talking about that Trump fit right into the plans of the American superpower, the establishment. He fit right in. He's a caricature. He's a caricature who's dividing the country, and he gets people to fight with each other. And Trump is kind of a recruitment tool for this blockheaded left and the blockheaded right. Obama was a caricature. Bush was a caricature. So it's much more likely that Trump acted according to the plans and according to the wishes of Western establishment. That's much more likely than Trump selling out to the Russians just to get some dirt on Hillary, just to get some promised unspecified dirt on Hillary to win a presidency he never really wanted. So nobody in mainstream media ever admitted that that Trump's business dealings with Russians and intermediaries, that this was acceptable to the Western intelligence community. Nobody in Western mainstream media has ever really admitted that, clearly. You know, luring in Russian possible mobsters or real mobsters and luring in these high-level Russians, thereby causing a massive stir in Russia. You know, it's not just like the Americans had an outbreak of paranoia in Russia. It's much worse because of Trump. And you know, getting involved with Deutsche Bank and doing all these weird dealings and that sort of stuff. That was not just benefiting Russians. That was really interesting for the Western intelligence community. You know, people moving back and forth, money moving back and forth. That's really interesting for the intelligence community. And it would have taken one lunch meeting between years ago, one lunch meeting between Trump and some intermediary for the Western establishment or the American intelligence community. A meeting where Trump asks, well, I need money. I need new loans. How about I sell to the Russians? How about I get involved with the Russians? Would that be a problem? And remember, this was before 2014, before the Ukrainian conflict, and before 2014, people were encouraged to deal with the Russians. And at this lunch meeting, at this meeting, Trump could have been told, yeah, you just go ahead. You know, don't get caught doing anything stupid, but you know, just draw them in. Just draw them in, and we'll keep an eye on that. Simple as that, right? Simple as that. Same thing that probably Hillary did. Just with her support for the Russian equivalent of Silicon Valley, the Skolkovo project, where Hillary got many important American companies involved. It takes one meeting, you know. Okay, how far can I go? You know, is this okay? Could that get me in trouble? No, just keep it safe. Play it like this, play it like that. Okay. So, just with these two conventional lines of thinking that I explained, they're not really realistic. They don't really jive with the general situation and the way the superpowers are and how they influence each other and how they work with each other. Just the risk is too high. The risk is way too high. Trump didn't really want to become president. You know, losing to Hillary by a few percent, by a few points, would have boosted Trump's businesses and turned him into a household name. And he could have started a big media empire, which was his intention. Trump didn't want to become president, and he wasn't stupid enough to risk everything he is and everything he owned. Risk everything for a meager promise from the Russians to deliver some unspecified dirt on Hillary. So yes, there were meetings and a bit sloppy, you know, oh, well, my son and, well, Trump Jr. and this other guy, they met with some woman from Russia, and you know, they talked for a bit, and there was some emails. Yeah, let's talk to that. You know, let's have this meeting and whatever. And hey, maybe they got something interesting for us. You know, it's just a bit sloppy. It's just some sloppiness. But not real evidence of treason. I mean, the Trumps are narcissistic, but they've been in business for so long. They know the tricks. They know the simple traps. They know how to avoid the simple traps. So yeah, there are business dealings and touchy-feely meetings and some hacked emails that were not that important. And yes, the Russians had a propaganda campaign in the West, like they've done for 100 years and or almost 100 years. That's none of that is anything surprising. None of that proves in any way that Trump sold out his country to get some unspecified dirt from the Russians on Hillary. It's just the scenario is not really realistic. And the Russians are not stupid either. I mean, once Russia is exposed for meddling in a serious way, you know, not just propaganda campaigns, not just pushing the line that Trump is so much better than Hillary and whatever. And no, if the Russians get caught, hypothetically get caught blackmailing Trump with a videotape or selling Hillary dirt to Trump in exchange for promises to lift sanctions or whatever, or one thing or another. Once the Russians get caught, they're screwed. They just shot themselves in the foot, in the knee. It would look terrible. And if the Russians have a sex tape, hypothetically speaking, if the Russians had a sex tape and they would leak it, what then? The damage would be mostly on Russia, because they would seem like a big threat and meddling beyond, you know, anything that would be called somewhat acceptable or stuff that would be tolerated or ignored. So it was not just would have been an insane risk for Trump, would have also been an insane risk for Russia. I mean, is that all the Russians could come up with? Some email dirt? The Podesta emails? The DNC emails? You know, Hillary, you know, basically Hillary putting the brakes on Bernie Sanders and Hillary doing a bit of this and a bit of that. Is that all the Russians could come up with? For a close United States presidential race, is that all the Russians had to offer? Was that the great Russian plan, to get some mediocre dirt, to sell some mediocre dirt to the Trump campaign in a way that's going to get the Russians caught and it's going to look horrible, without even knowing if Trump would keep his promises? If Trump, who could have stumbled over anything from his past, why take the risk? Why would the Russians take a risk like that and have 1,000 traces out there? It's just not realistic. And now you have people very anxious about the midterm elections, you know, what Mueller is going to do. Nothing could come out of it. And now we have people fearing a false flag attack benefiting the Democrats. So, for example, we have Mike Adams. He's warning about something like this. He's warning about some false flag operation where some operative or whatever, they stage a shooting or do an actual shooting, for example, at the CNN building, and then the shooting would be blamed on a right-wing Trump supporter. And this could derail the Republicans. This could screw things up for them in the midterm elections. And this would also be another pretext for more censorship on these social media platforms and whatnot. But remember, the Democrats and the Republicans are working for the same establishment. Remember the Lewinsky thing with Clinton that changed nothing. Remember what George Bush did and all that talk about impeachment, and nothing ever came out of it. And it's not just the Democrats who could theoretically pull off a secret operation. It's the Republican side as well who could pull off an operation like this. So it's not just, you can't just view it and think inside the box and just fear a certain scenario when there's a lot of more scenarios that could happen. Think about this. Noam Chomsky and I think even The Intercept, which is left-wing sort of investigative media, they feared a while ago that there might be some staged event, you can look that up, there might be some staged event benefiting the Trump administration. So what's going to happen if there's a weird, suspicious event benefiting the Trump administration before the midterms? What then? What is Mike Adams going to say? What is InfoWars going to say? Will they investigate, or will they say, oh, well, this suits us politically, so we're going to shut up about it? And you can't view it like this, you know, and you can't think inside the box. I mean, we know that Alex Jones recently flipped on the FEMA camp issue and also the Rex 84 issue, which means the government keeping lists of enemies within the population. For 20 years, Alex Jones has warned about these internment camps and the government maintaining these lists. And for more than 20 years, patriots in America have been very concerned, and rightfully concerned, that there might be some staged crisis or some intentionally manufactured crisis, for example, involving a left-wing militant uprising or a limited civil war or a flood of Mexican migrants and maybe a Latino insurrection, an armed insurrection and stuff like that, leading to the declaration of martial law, leading to people getting arrested in these internment camps, and also conservative patriots being arrested in these internment camps. And now Alex Jones flipped on this and says, he said he fell for left-wing propaganda. These camps were really meant to incarcerate radical leftists, and Trump is going to save America with these camps if he has to use them, and save America with these lists of enemies of the state. So that's a situation we're in. Now, logically, if the Mueller investigation actually found a smoking gun, they probably would not be allowed to use that. So, just hypothetically, if there was a smoking gun found, the United States establishment, the true power elite, they could cover this up. They could call a high-level meeting with the Russians and say, okay, we have something embarrassing here, but if you, Russia, play this card, it will only damage us in the short run and won't matter. And we can hit back at you. You know, we have some embarrassing stuff on Putin or whatever. And we can hurt you real bad. So let's just all drop that and get on with our empire business. So this is just the reality of it, right? This is just the reality, and it's ridiculous to think that the establishment didn't know about Trump and that they had no control over Trump, and the establishment didn't do a background check on Trump thoroughly. It's ridiculous to think that way, and so that's why politics is like a Muppet show. It's a big ridiculous show. And I'm not advocating a boycott of politics or the political sphere. You know, I'm not a libertarian anarchist who tells you to stay away from politics. I'm telling you to do it properly, right? Just consider not just the political sphere, but consider the superpowers, how they're built, consider the intelligence agencies, the secret structures, and consider the actual issues at hand and pick some good, decent books to learn about these issues. This is how you do proper politics. It's not about lying all day, seemingly for your own benefit. It's not about that. That's only going to serve you in the short run. And so all these people out there, be it Alex Jones or others, if they don't have the secret insights into the Mueller investigation, they don't know where this investigation is going. But it's not going to help. It's not going to help the American citizens if you politicize this topic, if you politicize a question like this. You know, what was Trump doing and what are his business dealings? Just do a real investigation. Find out what that means. Find out if Trump maybe was doing all this in accordance with the Western intelligence community. You know, if he played it like that. So it's very important. So we'll keep you updated on this topic and give you the broader picture instead of just getting lost in the details and in the whole politicizing of this development. If you like this video, please subscribe, comment down below, and please support us on Patreon as well.